Hey guys, and welcome back to the Terror Zone. Today, we're going to be breaking down Ichabod and Mr. Toad and breaking down their origins. Starting with Mr. Toad's story. Now, before we get into anything, let me just explain to you what these two stories are all about. This is one of Disney's package films, where they packaged two different films and other stuff like that together, like two different cartoons close together. And this is one of them. So it starts off with Mr. Toad, who is very obsessed with the newest items. Like in this one, where he's obsessed with a motor car, and he wants it badly. Like, very badly. Up to the point where he's framed for stealing one. And his friends have to try to help him. Like Mole, Rat, and Badger. And it turns out, I don't want to give anything away, but that's how the story goes. Now they got a little bit of the summary out of the way, let's talk about the book. The book has a lot of difference to the story and a lot of similarities to the Disney one. Now, there are some things that are a little bit different, so I'll break them down for you. What happens first is that in the book, it starts off stating that it's actually Mole who is the main character in the book, not Mr. Toad, like it's supposed to. So the whole book kind of evolves around Mole being the new animal in town. And Rat kind of is the first one to step up and say, hey, let me show you around, and all that kind of stuff. And eventually, Rat and Mole hang out together for quite some time in the book, until eventually Rat mentions Toad, and that how he used to be in the moat along with them, in the river or whatever with them. Because you see, Rat hangs out by the river with a boat, and Mole hangs around with him. After a while, Toad comes up in the conversation, where Toad used to actually live during the river as well, down the river as well. But he stopped going there after he got a gypsy cart, or whatever you want to call it, a cart. Or yeah, after he started getting a cart and a horse. One day, Rat and Mole decide to meet him one day, and go on this adventure. And later, this takes like two parts, is where it starts to sound like the Disney movie, where he gets framed and all that kind of stuff. So it's all by two chapters. So we kind of flip around by Mole's story, Rat's story, a little bit of Badger, and Toad is just kind of on his own storyline here. So all the characters are kind of in multiple storylines. So it's all different in some ways. So there's all different stories and different chapters like that. But soon they all intertwine with each other when they're all friends and all that stuff. There's also a very interesting chapter where a rat meets another creature that's unlike his friends. And he talks to him for a little while, and he hangs out with him. I'm not going to say who he is yet, but he is a very interesting guy. And it's better off if you read that particular chapter for yourself. Because it's a very interesting chapter. I think it's really cool how Rat meets this particular person, and that he's so different from everybody else in the world. But I think it's really cool. So, aside from Wind of the Willows being a book and like had some different storylines around it, pretty much everything that Disney has done, they played it safe, and they kind of made everything almost the same. So there's nothing really dark to be said here, but for the most part, it is different and well said. So I think it's worth a read. Go read Wind of the Willows. I think it's worth a read. A little bit. It's a very interesting, and I think it deserves to be read. And now, we will talk about Ichabod, and move on from Mr. Toad, of course. We got Ichabod. So, we're going to break down this already very spooky story and make it more terrifying than it seems. So basically, Ichabod's story basically starts off pretty much the same thing as the Disney version. It starts out pretty much the same, only it's more detailed and more spooky. So basically, the author describes Sleepy Hollow and how spooky it is, how dark and mysterious, how terrifying it is. So in a way, it's a very Halloweenish type right off the spot. And with that, the Headless Horseman has a very rich history, with the fact that his killings have been spoken all around Sleepy Hollow. He is very popular amongst people, basically. Kind of like in the Disney movie, how Barnes Bones, or let's just call him Bones for now. I just don't know why I can't speak his name right. Let's just call him Brawn Bones. Sorry about that, guys. So Brawn Bones kind of passes on the story to everybody else. Well, he doesn't really pass on the story, but you get the picture. In the Disney version, he kind of tells everybody the story, but in this one, people already know about the story already, and it's kind of an old legend type of thing. Before I discuss the story any further, I'd like to explain something about Washington Irving. Washington Irving, while he was making the story in particular, he was actually taking a trip in Tarrytown, and he is so fascinated with the town and how it was, he decided to write a book about it. I'm not going to get any details about the author or anything because I don't want to go too far with it, so I'm just going to give a little summary out there of what he contribute to the story a little bit. So just to give you a little context of how he felt about the story in particular, how he made it so spooky and everything. We'll cover him down a little bit, but for now, I think it's enough to say that he enjoyed Tarrytown for the most part. That when Washington Irving went to Tarrytown, I guess he must have came up the legend of Sleepy Hollow, where he was told the story of the Headless Horseman, and I guess the story of Ichabod Crane, you would say. He must have heard the legend somewhere or other in the town. It got inspiration and decided to adapt it to America and other stuff like that. Now, I'd like to talk about Ichabod Crane for a minute. When he enters the town, everybody, like in the Disney movie, is so fascinated on him and how different he is from everybody else. How he has feet that look like shovels. How he looks like a scarecrow. And he has a big, giant, small face. And a little bit of a big, giant nose. So, all those all those details come from the book as well. And they have very big details onto Ichabod as well. Most of it is very similar to the Disney movies. I won't go into it all that much. So, it's in more detailed. So, they also mention in the book that Ichabod Crane is a very skilled school teacher. He's very kind to the children, just like in the Disney movie, really. He's really good and very strict. And he also loves the food, of course. Very caring, too. And he would walk all his students home, just like the Disney version, and also have dinner with them as well, with their parents, and talk about studying and how their pupils can work better and all that kind of stuff. Sure that his pupils came home safely. He would even stay over, because as a school teacher, he didn't really get much payment. He'd also help around the town a little bit, so he was well famous around the town. Mostly the Disney version, he is well known and very, very popular. But of course, every person like him might as well. Of course, Ichabod was destined to find a lover, and that was Katrina, of course. Like the Disney movie where Ichabod just met her, and by her beautifulness, he gazed upon her. It was more like that, and also unlike the Disney version, nobody was gaining up on Katrina. Well, except maybe there were a few people who did in the book, but not really all that much. So, all I could say is, what happened was, Katrina happened to be one of Ichabod's students in his singing class. So not only did Ichabod teach children, he also taught grown-ups as well to sing and all sorts of things. So Katrina was one of them, and he ended up falling in love with Ichabod falling in love with her while teaching her. After she made sure she got home and everything, he saw her lovely farm, the massive home she had with her father, and all the riches they had. A Disney movie, he can't help but fantasize on how much that money would bring him once he marries her. Of course, we can't forget Bron Bones. He's also after Katrina, so we gotta let him in too. Say Abraham von Brunt, which is Bron Bones' original name, but people like to call him Bron Bones because of his detailed, strong look. You see, in the Sleepy Hollow book, they explain more detail of what Bron Bones is like, and his personality and his traits, and they also explain on how strong he is and how he looks too. And just like the movie, Bron Bones is in love with Katrina as well. But also in the movie, Katrina has her own things up her sleeve where she cannot decide on who she wants, and that she is trying to test Bron Bones and Ichabod to her liking a bit. Not showing interest, but more likely that she's so interested in both of them and trying to see which one's better for her. Throughout the simulacry of the story, just like the movie, Bron Bones makes up total pranks and little beat-ups and a little bit here and there to stop Ichabod from getting onto his girl. But, of course, Ichabod, for his arrogance and ways, he always found a way to get out of it. Bron Bones will even go as far as vandalize the schoolhouse entirely. Yeah. I don't see how Katrina is actually attracted to this dude at all. Overhears the stories, and one of the stories was about a white woman who screeches a lot in the distance of a forest. Like a banshee or something like that. And a lot of people talk about their events with Headless Horseman and what they seen and what they heard and everything. And this includes Bron Bones. He left, feeling sour pretty much, because at first he kind of felt happy and joyful, but then something got a little sour with Katrina. We're not really sure what happened, but she might have was somehow making Bron Bones jealous of her in some way. Somehow she still had a little feeling spot for him as well. So in a way, it's a little bit of a sour feeling where Ichabod might think that Bron Bones where Katrina's more interested in him than him. Let's explain about Ichabod's horse. Ichabod's horse in the movie is very, very sleepy-eyed and doesn't really pay attention to Ichabod's demands. Probably because he is pretty much a gloomy and saddish and a bit... The book explains a little bit more detail about Gunpowder. Yes, that is his name. Gunpowder, I'm going to call him, rusty and had a huge neck. You see, Gunpowder was only made for being a hammered down plowing horse. He was never made for any travel, so when it came down to traveling, he was very sleepy and didn't really have the body to be up for it. Had a missing eye as well. So he wasn't the best horse to look at, really. And Ichabod slowly hears voices of his name calling. The ghost that he slowly hears hallucinating a few ghost stuff he hears and he sees in the woods. He also remembers all the scary stories that he'd been taught. So as he silently walks through the night on his horse. He can feel melancholy stuff everywhere within him. Suddenly, Gunpowder stops, and he sees a figure in the dark. It was the Headless Horseman. Although Ichabod did not know he was the Headless Horseman, so first he asked who he was. There was no answer. Ichabod whistled to soothe himself a bit with a song, but that doesn't really help much when the Headless Horseman is charging right at him just as soon as the whistle starts. It gets really fast and edge. The chase is on. It seems like the Headless Horseman, every time Ichabod would run, the Headless Horseman would stay a few minutes ahead. Like he always stayed right on his speed no matter what. No slowing down, no nothing. And once they went up the hill, through the trees, into the bridge, the moon shining on the Headless Horseman, knowing that he was all black, with no head to be seen. Just like in the Disney movie, oddly enough, Ichabod actually loses his grip on the saddle as they keep chasing each other at some point. So he got so scared that he almost lost his balance. So there. I didn't even know that was real until now, really. But I guess that's where Disney got their inspiration from, where he lost his balance with a tree and had to go on the Headless Horseman's horse, which is a little bit crazy how that could be true, to say the least. Feels the breath of the Headless Horseman. He thought his life was over, but he knew that he was close to the bridge, so he took that chance to go through the bridge to get safely home. Bo said to him, once he went through that bridge, he disappears. Just like his story, he disappears. Just like the Disney movie, he disappears. Well, he doesn't really disappear, they just say his power ends. But mostly the same thing, really, if you ask me. Ichabod ran right through the bridge, and he was safe, all in one piece, along with Gunpowder. Unfortunately, he looked back to see if he was still being followed. But what he saw was not the Headless Horseman, but a big giant pumpkin coming towards him. The next day, Ichabod did not show up to his schoolhouse, or anything for that matter. They got worried, so they started to look for him everywhere. All they could find was his hat, his saddle, and a shattered pumpkin, the bridge. After everybody forgotten all about Ichabod, and because that's the only thing they could find of him, they decided to forget all about him entirely. Not only that, but after he left, the whole schoolhouse closed down. It was abandoned. Nobody ever heard or ever seen the schoolhouse ever again, for they have forgotten all about everything. The schoolhouse, Ichabod, everything. Shortly after, Katrina and Brom Bones were married, and the narrator says, after that, whenever someone brought up Ichabod or anyone like that, he would just laugh and say, ha ha. I guess you could say he got killed by the Headless Horseman. The legends where they say that Ichabod is still alive, and that he's living with a widow with many children, and he's still gathering his teachings, but he's living in a different place. He moved, basically. Or some people say that Brom Bones dressed up as the Headless Horseman and killed him, just so he can get Katrina. But what do you guys think? What do you think is the true ending of the Headless Horseman? No one really knows, for it's only a legend. My opinion is that he really got killed by the Headless Horseman. I think the real Headless Horseman. I don't think Brom Bones killed him. I don't think he lived by a widow. I think he really got killed by the Headless Horseman. That's what I think. But who knows? It's only a legend. The two stories, Mr. Wind of the Willows and Sleepy Hollow. How did you like them? Were they interesting to you? Let me know in your comments down below. And we'll see you next time on The Terror Zone. Another bonus of The Terror Zone. I know we covered in last episode, we covered a lot of endings close to the Ichabod story. But this is not all over yet. For there are some detailed stuff we need to cover. Like Ichabod actually served in law. He was once a lawyer, and he worked very well into the school as well. So, what else? Oh, there's also a few stories that Washington Irving. So, where did these stories come from? That's what we're going to explain today. Horseman was passed on to many different countries. In Scotland, he's referred as the dueling hand. Like in certain stories, in Scotland in particular, the Headless Horseman is not headless at all. He has his head, he's carrying his head instead of holding it on his shoulders. He's carrying it in his hand, and it's glowing as well. Ooh. He uses it as a lantern. Very similar to the glowing pumpkin you see in the Disney version. So, if you came across the dueling hand, he would throw a bucket of blood right in your face. Ew. Yeah, very gross. He's also as known as a solitary fairy, where he is the symbol of death. The Headless Horseman is more like the Grim Reaper in some cases, where he is the symbol of death, where he comes to you in the night and just kills you. Just like Maleficent, the Headless Horseman just is more of a negative, more death, more bad fairy type of deal. He even had horses that were headless like he was. Unlike the other stories, there is one good story. This one happens to be a different Headless Horseman story. So let me break it down for you. There's this guy named Charlie who meets this Headless Horseman, and he has a white horse instead of a black horse. And he seems like a very nice guy. He doesn't really try to kill Charlie or anything like that. He's more of a friend of his than, well, not really a friend, but more like just a common folk. More like a acquaintance, let's just say. And they have a friendly conversation with each other as well. So, unlike the other stories, he's more of a bit of a nice guy than an evil guy's intentions are. The Headless Horseman and Charlie happen to have a very, very friendly little chase together, and they have a little race together as well to see who wins. And turns out the Headless Horseman wins, of course, but he was very agreeable, and he accepted the fact that he won, and that he showed good sportsmanship to Charlie and him as well. And he told brilliant stories about himself and Charlie together. And he also said to him, "Charlie, if you stay brave and true, I'll always come to help you, no matter what." What a nice guy, huh? Where a woman is picking up an acorns, and while she's picking up those acorns, she sees a headless figure. And the headless figure asks, Have you ever thought that you're stealing those?" He said that she was stealing those acorns. So she knew that stealing was wrong, so she said no. Of course, the animals knew that she was stealing from them, but they let her go, for she was very poor when the Headless Horseman called her. But for the most part, she was forgiven for the fact that she thought what she did was the Headless Horseman thought what she did was brave and very, very, smart of her, basically. So he left her off the hook, basically. Within the story, that this Headless Horseman was a bad guy, and he was punished by getting his head cut off, and had to look for other people the same way he was for all eternity. So basically, he was trying to teach that woman a lesson. By if you do this, you'll become like me, basically, kind of giving her a fair warning. And with that is it for the Terror Zone. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you thought this was interesting. And we'll come back for more terrifying and dark stories.